Hello and welcome to a new episode of Bedhead, and today we'll be talking about what's happening to the business ethics in this age of propaganda. Well, maybe I'm the only former psychological warfare operations officer in the compliance and ethics industry, so I think it's time to actually throw some light at what's going on and why suddenly a lot of people and employees, of course, lost interest in business ethics and other related things, as well as coaching and therapy and blah blah blah. So let's look at the fact that the current state, emotional state, most of us find ourselves today is definitely far from being normal, because we are being constantly stressed out and bombarded with news. I mean, let's call them like fake news, because most of them are, most of that news is generated as we don't even know how, by whom, and when, and they sort of hide behind the mainstream and mixed with the social media follow-up and what have you. But the goal, the objective of this fake news, propaganda, and let's face it, it is very similar to the warfare operations, which can only happen during the war. So we are at war right now, and we as citizens are being targeted, because the objective of this ongoing information pandemic, aside from the COVID, propaganda and COVID-related news, is our emotional state. Let's face it. I mean, the difference between the emotional state in which Russians find themselves today and Americans is very similar. The American Psychological Association just recently reported that 66% of Americans feel stressed out, and that stress comes from the news they get and the fact that they are always sought out to rock them and shake them and shock them out of their emotional state, and that seems to be the target. So why is this happening? Well, security experts like Zinger and Emerson Brooking, they came up with a good and a very precise term for this, calling it weaponization of the social media, because the way the media trigger our emotional response to things, it's actually not very rational. It's actually being very irrational. So therefore, the emotional brain is being the target. It's actually the limbic system, which is the oldest, mammalian brain that governs our emotions, fears, as well as the enhanced learning and memory. But inside that limbic system, we've got the amygdala that sits there and governs our, response. And what's really important, it governs our judgmental system, how we discern, how we choose, how we react to specific situations. So as you can see, that if the emotional brain being the target, well, that probably explains why we feel so exhausted, because we're being shocked out of our ability to run our lives. So therefore, the control over our lives has been taken away. And the rational brain, which kind of is the prefrontal cortex, which normally responds to situations being good or bad, and at the same time displaying the good judgment and being aware of the long-term consequences of our decisions. As you can see, they're not really working together, and that explains why New York psychology professor Jonathan Haidt, he kind of gave a good description of what it's like. It's like the emotional brain being the elephant and the rational brain being the rider. So the elephant, that represents hopes, fears, desires, wishes, and what have you. And the rider, doesn't really have full control of the elephant. It's sort of like goes with the flow, kind of like goes with it where the elephant goes, and at the same time tries to, reason with the elephant, admonish it. So, but you can see that there's a very good metaphor. I mean, doesn't look like that rider, has a lot of luck, rebuking the elephant for breaking all the china in the shop. So, as you can see now, we're going to take a step away from the media, keeping us in that constant stress towards the new ethic, which is interesting because now the business ethics and all that stuff, has been supplanted by this new ethic, which again is not, you would not find a definition readily. I mean, at least if you Google it, it won't really pop at you. So, but the whole point behind the new ethic is to validate the emotional response as the just one. So if I feel anger, I feel the right to express it and lash out at whoever may be causing that anger. Now you can see that how the fake news and that new ethic go hand in hand, right? So the media, they kind of stir up all those emotions, raw emotions, and the new ethic sort of justifies, sometimes barbaric acts. I mean, you know all about it from the news, right? So even though I have to say that the new ethic as a concept is somewhat totally different in Russia, because it sort of like covers the rise, to address the ongoing issues such as cyberbullying, harassment, discrimination, inequality. I mean, all the good stuff. Well, again, against the backdrop of the kind of a regime we have in Russia, that may come across as some positive force, a positive thing to do, but as opposed to the U.S., where it is normally seen as a destructive force, leading the discussion away and not allowing to have a structured conversation. So there's no dialogue. That's the whole point. Overriding everything with emotions, again, justifying it's almost like, you try to justify like, something like a road rage, right? Pulling out a gun and shooting someone for like cutting in front of you. So therefore, again, based on the experience and what I studied about the psychological warfare operations, I do believe now that at some point, what's going on, which started out as being sort of like a, as a fad, but it's definitely moving towards being classified at some point as the crime against humanity, and it's no laughing matter. Why? Well, I will not talk about the COVID, and all that stuff related to that, but let's look at this situation from this perspective. Why is that the mental health issues are soaring? It's not just necessarily because people are stressed over the COVID infodemic, but it's also because people cannot go on like that, being stressed out bunnies on a daily basis. The productivity goes down, the performance goes down. I'm not even talking about the political divide, but think about the psychological divide within the families. How much younger generations are affected by this. It is a crime, and somebody will be held responsible for this, I hope. So as you can see, it's very difficult to find some space for the business ethics, and it's like, as if you're preaching the good ethics right and when everybody's swept up by the storm. So, but at the same time, if we take a step further, you can see that once you remove this botched morality of the new ethic, and in the absence of the, sound business ethics, we begin to see this rapid ethical fading and the rise of scandals related to misconduct and other things. Not to mention the corruption that's back. It's back and it's very palpable. even though companies try to justify that they're trying to survive, which reminds you probably of the too big to fail crisis back in 2008. We see all of that, and you see how much all of it is intertwined. So, so when people complain that, oh, like ethicists, they see this dramatic drop of interest to anything like, business ethics lectures, and therapy goes out the window because people seek relief instantly, right now. People cannot think long term about how much time they can invest in their therapy. People try to look for crutches, do some, sign up for yoga classes, meditation, practice mindfulness. But again, it's just all cosmic stuff. It just drives this anger and stress inside. And at some point, people break. They suffer this emotional breakdown. So again, if you look at all the elements of it, it does appear that infodemic, this is more of a full-blown psychological warfare going on, and we are the victims. Stay tuned for more.